Okay, this is Yvonne. I'm back, and this is part 3 of my story. And where I had left off at was when this investigator from the Adult Protective Services, uh, what she said to my daughter was, and my mother was that my mother did not know that Curleen was her power of attorney because she was incompetent. And so this woman blatantly called my mother incompetent in her face because my mother told her that she did not have a power of attorney. Now, I had tried to get my mother to give me power of attorney while I was over there, and I was taking care of her, and none of my other siblings was coming around, and she would call my brother up over and over, and he wouldn't answer the phone, and then I would call him up and he would answer the phone, and I'm like, well, Ma, I've been trying to call you. Why you wasn't answering the phone? Oh, well, she just repeat herself over and over. But that's your mother. So what? She can repeat herself over and over and over and over to me, and I just answer. And sometimes I say, Ma, you just asked me that. So what? It's your mother. She's getting old. She's 87. Okay? So I earlier asked my mother to issue me power of attorney. I have the paperwork, and I asked, and I was going to put my sister, my deceased sister's daughter, Keisha, as on name on the power of attorney with mine. My mother looked at those papers and she read through each one of them. It was like 11 pages. And she handed it back to me and she said, I'm not ready to do anything like that. She said, I have 7 children. She said, y'all have to work together and all y'all come and take care of me. Okay? And those was her final words on that. She was like determined, like most elderly people, from back in the day, they don't want a power of attorney. For some reason, they just don't want that. So if she didn't want that, and she said that everybody had to work together, then hey, I was willing to work with any and everyone in the family. I was there with my mother. And I welcomed them. I tried to say, well, won't we all take a day? After I had the house remodeled, renovated with Christmas in April, I asked each and every one of my brothers and sisters, I even text them, we used to communicate by text. And I said, well, why don't we set up my old bedroom, which is directly across from my mother's bedroom. I said, why don't we set that up as a family room? And we'd put a new bed in there, new mattress, and, I'll put a couple of sets of sheets. And if we take turns coming and spending the night with my mother, like I might come on Monday and stay until Tuesday, and I'm responsible for the 3 meals and everything on that day. And then my sister can come, and then another sister can come on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then my brother maybe come on Thursday, and then one of my other brothers could come on Friday, and then maybe one of the grandchildren could come on Saturday. Or it wasn't like my mother actually needed someone to be there for, but my mother got to the point where she said, I'm retired. I done raised y'all all my life. I'm not cooking nothing. Y'all come and take care of me. And so, hey, it was all good to me. I liked the fact that she was sitting back and calling her shots because my mother has been good to everybody. My mother used to make us go take elderly people food. I mean, it didn't matter who they was. We had to go take them food, knock on their door, go to DC, go to Capitol Heights, go to anywhere. I mean, my mother was always a person who took care of others. So now it was time for us to take care of her, and I didn't have a problem with that. But anyhow, so this woman decides that my mother cannot go with anyone but Curleen, or either she was going to have to put her in assisted living. I'm looking at her like, excuse me? My mother said, well, they finally came out of the house, and I was out there on the front, and the police was out there. She had let me come in briefly and give my mother a hug because my mother was a little confused, but she put me right back out the house, So I'm out standing out on the front with my nieces, Andrea and Keisha, and we outside, and she comes out with Curleen and my mother, and this Adult Protective Services, the investigator, come out. And she's sending my mother off with Curleen. And so my mother said, well, if I have to leave, she saw me. She said, I'll go with Vonnie. She said, no, you can't go with her. You have to go with Curleen because she's your power of attorney. My mother said then and there. And I said also that she didn't have a power of attorney. But this lady insisted that my mother had a power of attorney and Curleen was that power of attorney. Now, I later found out that I received a copy of this power of attorney later, just like a couple of months ago. I received it right before court, or right after we went to court in November. And this power of attorney, yes, I showed it to my mother. And not only did I know it was not her signature, she said it wasn't her signature. And the date that it was done, and a notary was one of my sister's co-workers who worked up at the jail. And then my two brothers witnessed that they were there. And then the signature on it looked very similar to my sister Thelma's signature. And then on the back page, where it was not really saying anything about the power of attorney, there was my mother's rightful signature. Because I think that she was told to sign something for the bank, or I don't know how they got her to sign it, because my mother usually read everything. But the actual page of this power of attorney, the signature on that page and the signature on the back page are two different signatures. So that was a little funny to me, because the date that it had said it was signed was back in November of, I believe that was of 2017. And I know for a fact that my mother did not go, and no one came to my mother's house to issue or to sign a power of attorney. I know for a fact that it's bogus, it's forged, and it's not real. And my mother said, I didn't sign that. She would still to this day tell you she hasn't given anyone power of attorney. And then let's just say, if she had given my sister power of attorney, which she didn't, power of attorney does not mean guardianship. So this woman coming in this house and supposed to be investigating for exploitation, and decides that she wants to condemn the house and make everybody in my mother's house homeless all in a matter of an hour, and put everybody on the street and tell everybody she's closing the house down, had Mr. Waters to put a sign unfit for human habitation on the basement door. Now, he didn't put it on the front door. He put it on the basement door. Okay? And then this later ended up being a mistake. The director or the supervisor who I spoke with over at DPI told me that was human error. He made a mistake by putting that sign on the basement door. It shouldn't have ever been there, but it's still there to this day. They never went to remove it, okay? And so everyone just had to pack up what they could pack up and get out of the house. The police was there and told them, everybody had to go. Now, I've never seen an eviction go down like that, and I was confused, and everybody in the house was confused, because the house was in way better shape than it had been like in previous years since the renovation. So I'm trying to understand what is so condemned about my mother's house, okay? But at any rate, I watched my mother go off with my sister, and that was the last of me seeing my mother for a period of time. Now, I would go, and I called over to the Adult Protective Services office, and I'm trying to find out, what's going on. And I noticed I would never get a phone call. I would never get an answer. I mean, the receptionist was answered, but Miss Bagali was never available. I went over and talked to the supervisors, and I finally got to speak with an acting supervisor by the name of Mrs. Peterson. And at this time, my sister had my mother, but she was not allowing me to see my mother at all. Okay, she was holding my mother in complete isolation. She even took, and she was going out of town or something, and she took my mother down to Norfolk, Virginia, to my brother Robert's house. Now, this is something that my mother would not have ever done on her own. Yes, we've been to Robert's house before on a visit, but it might have spent the night, but I could count the many times, how many times my mother has did that in her lifetime on one hand, okay? So that's not something that my mother normally would do, but it was something that she was forced to do, okay? And one day I took and my mother called me up, and she said, some lady in this house with me, I don't know who she is. I was like, well, where's Caroline? She said she went somewhere. I was like, well, who is the lady? I said, well, let me speak to her. So my mother got the lady on the phone, and she told me her name was Debbie. And I told her that I was in the area and I was going to come by to see my mother. Okay, she had just recently been up Carlene's house at this time. I guess maybe about less than a month. Okay, and so I said, well, I was in the area and I wanted to come and see my mother. So she said, well, you have to talk to Caroline. So I was like, okay, I'll text her. So I text my sister and I said, well, I was in the area and I was going to stop by to see Mama. So next thing I know, I was talking to my mother on the phone, and my sister's daughter came over to the house. Evidently, she called her daughter and said, go over to the house, because Vonnie talking about she coming over there, and Debbie over there, go over there, you know. So her daughter was there. So I was telling my mom, I said, oh, well, here come Keisha. I said, oh, let me speak to Keisha. I'll tell Aunt Vonnie I'm on the phone right now talking to somebody. She wouldn't get on the phone. It was cool, okay, because I knew who she was talking to. She was talking to my other niece. And next thing I know, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, my mom said, oh, Mike here now too. Everybody coming home. All of a sudden, after I said I was coming up there to visit her, okay? So I asked Mike, I told my mother, I said, ask Mike why is it that Caroline don't want me to come to the house to see you? So my mother said, Mike Vonnie said, why Caroline don't want her to come and see me? Mike said, well, she has to ask those people. She has to ask the Adult Protective Services people. This is what they're telling us, okay? I said, well, no, I've spoke with them. I've even called as far as the governor's office. I mean, it's no reason why I can't communicate, speak with you, be with you. I mean, you don't have a guardian. You know, it's nothing restricting me from seeing you. So I'm trying to understand, tell Mike that's not. So Mike got on the phone and I said, let me speak to him. So when he got on the phone, he left out of the room where my mother was. And evidently he went out on his back porch or somewhere where my mother could not hear the conversation. And he said to me, let me tell you something. If you bring your MFA up here, I'm going to shoot you. I will kill you if you step foot on my property. As much trouble as you done cause for me and my family, if you come up here, I will kill you. Don't you step near foot on my property. So I said, oh, well, you just tried to kill yourself about a year ago when you were out in the woods trying to commit suicide. I said, so you didn't kill yourself. So what, you want to kill me? You just want to kill somebody? I said, because I haven't did anything to you. Anyway, so when I said that, I guess he got upset and he hung up the phone in my ear and gave my mother the phone back. So I told my mother, and speaking to my mother, I said, did you hear how he was talking to me? And my mother said, no, he left out the room. I didn't hear anything. What did he say? I said, he cursed me out and told me I better not step near foot on his property. She said, what? I was like, yeah, I told her how the conversation went. So I went down to the courthouse and I filed a protective order because it's no way that you're going to have my mother locked up in your house or staying in your house, and I'm not going to have the ability to come and visit my mother, okay? She didn't go there by choice. She went there by force, okay? Now, it would be something else if she went there on her own will. If my mother would have said to me, oh, well, I want to go live with Curleen, I would have been fine with it, okay? But I know that my mother told me she wasn't going to live with nobody because Curleen had tried to get her when she was being released from the hospital. I don't know if you guys can recall, but if you go back on my timeline on Facebook, you will see I had the video of my mother laying in a hospital bed. And she said that she's not going to no Curleen house. She's going home because Curleen was trying to get possession of her then, saying, I'm retiring from my job and I'm going to take care of my mother. I had never heard that in 55 years. So where did this all of a sudden come from that you're going to retire and take care of your mother? Oh, I guess it was because your name was on that money. Okay? So anyhow, I took out the stay away order on my brother-in-law. And I had added my mother's name into it because, if you're going to kill me for coming to visit my mother, I'm sure that would be devastating for my mother to have to see her baby get killed just for trying to come and visit her where she was staying. So when I went to court, they didn't bring, no, let me just go back. So since they live in another county and I'm in here in Prince George's County, I had to go out to Anne Arundel County, and I called the police, and they had me meet the police around the corner from where my sister lived, and the police officer took me to my sister's house. So when I got there, my brother-in-law came out the house. He said, I told you don't come on my effing property. And then the police was walking up on the side, and they said, are you Mr. Addison? He said, yes, I am. They said, well, we have paperwork for you. And he looked, and he was like, I told that B don't come on my property. And I didn't say anything, I wasn't really there for an argument because, I didn't have a beef, and I still don't have a beef with my brothers and sisters. My only concern is my mother. I do not want my mother to be treated as if she's a child. I do not want my mother to be, her wishes and her demands to not be respected. I do not like my mother being brainwashed and intimidated and forced to stay in someone's house that she did not even visit when she was driving all the time. Okay? So, the police officer told them that they had a stay away order from him, and they gave him his paperwork. And then my sister popped out, what is she doing on our property? And so the police officer asked her where was Maisie Keller Phillips, and she said, oh, well, she's in the house. She said, well, you need to get her up out the house because we need to take her. They were going to give me my mother that day. And me, I didn't really understand that that's what they were doing. So they told my sister to go get my mother. My sister said, I have power of attorney. The police officer told her, I don't care what you have. You're going to get her up out of this house. That don't mean nothing. I have an order. So she said she cannot be within 100 feet of Michael Addison, and he lives here, right? So Michael said, I can leave. I have somewhere else where I could go. I don't have to be here. I can leave. So he got in his truck and he pulled off and left and said that he don't need to stay there, because he wanted my sister. He had to get away from my mother in order so she could stay. So that's how she ended up staying. But I could have demanded that she would have come with me, and that's what I wish I would have done. but I didn't. Okay? So my sister, that same day, okay, she goes to the Glen Burnie courthouse and she files a bogus stay away order against me. She goes down there and her husband got served at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, she was at the Glen Burnie courthouse doing a stay away order against me, a protective order against me. And boy, did she lie. I wish I have it here, but I'll have to bring out all the documents later and let you guys see the documents. But my sister actually went to the courthouse and said that I was coming to her house with my friends and harassing her, that I was abusing my mother by yelling and screaming at her and making her take me to the bank for money or I would not feed her or take care of her. I'm like, where in the hell did she get these lies from? How could she even make up a lie like that? But then I remembered back when I was younger and my other sister Tit, who's deceased, who actually my mother thought was going to be the one who was going to be the one to take care of her. And I can recall when I was a young girl and my sister Tit was working in a nursing home. And she used to come home and she used to say how, some of the elderly folks, mostly Caucasians, was calling her the N-word and get over here. And, just totally disrespecting her, I guess, like as if in slavery days, okay? And my sister, Curleen, I very clearly remember what she told my sister, Ted. She told her, what you do, I'm going to show you how to deal with that. And when you sitting them down and you acting and you assisting them, you won't sit them down, you slam them down. When you land them down, you throw their head back and like hit it up against the bed. It was, in other words, she was like, you handle them harshly and they will be submissive to you. Okay? Now, I don't know if my sister Tit actually did these things, but I know that my sister instructed her on how to control senior citizens who were out of control and who did not know how to talk to you. Okay? So, my sister, where was I at? Okay, so she filed the charges against me. Okay? So all the time now, she has control of my mother. Now, I told you I went to the Adult Protective Services office. I was calling the director there, Miss Carolyn Brown Brunette. I called the compliance office. I filed a complaint. Nobody ever called me back. I called the director. She never called me back. I went over there to see her. She was never available. I mean, it was like everybody in that office was totally ignoring me. I mean, I ended up calling to Baltimore to the state office and spoke with Miss Dorinda Adams. And Miss Dorinda Adams, I got to give her, I'm going to take my hat off to her because she treated me like a citizen. She treated me like a person. She treated me and talked to me with respect. You could tell that she was in the right job, but it was like she really couldn't. She was supposed to have a investigation conducted, but I don't know what happened with that. I called the governor's office and they put me in touch with people who was over top of the Department of Human Services and Adult Protective Services. And they were telling me how that this woman had no right to go into my mother's house and tell anybody they had to get out. She didn't have a right to do what she did. She misused her authority and she wasn't authorized and she was not following standard operating procedures. So by now, I'm just like confused as to why aren't they talking to me over at this office after they done took and snatched my mother up out of her home and forced her to go with the person whom should have been getting investigated. Okay, it's been a 25-minute. I'm going to go ahead and take a break and come back to let you guys get a little more of the story.